There's a specific sound when you hit steel at the right temperature. It's not a thud and it's not a clatter. It's a ring that vibrates right up your elbow and tells you the metal's actually happy to move for you. I spent my first 3 months in the shop basically trying to bully cold iron with a 3-pound hammer. I think the iron won that round.
Based on the state of your forearms, I'd say you two are still in a stalemate. But seriously, whenever people talk about blacksmithing, they get this look like they're about to go fight a dragon. It feels so inaccessible, like you need a castle and a secret lineage to start.
That's the big myth, isn't it? Everyone thinks you need a $5,000 power hammer and a master's degree in metallurgy from the Middle Ages. But the truth is, this is probably the most scavenger craft there is. You're essentially playing with fire and rocks, just with better handles.
Okay, let's peel back the curtain for the people listening who want to move beyond watching Forged in Fire on the couch. If I wanted to turn my backyard into a mini smithy this weekend without my neighbors calling the fire department, what are the actual big four tools I need?
It's simpler than a woodworking shop, honestly. You need a way to get the metal hot. That's your forge. You need something to lean it on, the anvil. You need a way to move it, the hammer. And you need a way to hold it, the tongs. That's the entire DNA of the craft.
The anvil is the one that scares people. I looked them up online and saw prices that made me want to go back to knitting. Does it have to be that classic Acme shape from the cartoons?
If you're waiting for a 200-pound London pattern anvil to fall out of the sky for $50, you're going to be waiting until the next ice age. My first anvil was actually a thick hunk of railroad track I found in a scrapyard. It felt like trying to work on a narrow balance beam, but it provided enough mass to push back. That's all an anvil is, a prehistoric heat sink that refuses to move when you hit it. You can literally use a large sledgehammer head buried in a bucket of sand.
A bucket of sand? That sounds dangerously DIY.
It's actually genius. The sand supports the head, and the mass of the earth does the work. But people get hung up on the horn, that pointy bit at the end. They think they need it on day one. But look at the history. For centuries, smiths just used a stake anvil, which is basically a steel cube. You can do 90% of your work on a flat surface.
All right, so we've got a heavy object to hit things on. What about the heat? I'm assuming my kitchen stove isn't going to cut it for 2,000-degree steel.
The forge is just a controlled campfire on steroids. You can build one out of an old brake drum from a truck, or even just a hole in the dirt with a pipe blowing air into it. That's the secret sauce. Air. Fire without a breeze is just for roasting marshmallows. Fire with a leaf blower or an old hairdryer, that's for moving mountains.
And the fuel? I saw a guy online use charcoal briquettes from the grocery store. I feel like that's the blacksmithing equivalent of using a butter knife as a screwdriver.
Don't tell the purists, but it works in a pinch. However, store-bought briquettes are full of binders and ash that make a mess. Real lump charcoal, the stuff that actually looks like charred wood, gets way hotter. If you can find actual metallurgical coal, that's the gold standard. It cakes together and builds a little oven of heat. Just maybe tell your neighbors you're having a very long, very smoky barbecue.
I'm not making a sword, Mrs. Peterson. I'm just really bad at grilling burgers. Okay, so we've got the heat and the seat. Let's talk about the hit. I see these massive hammers, but you aren't exactly Thor. How do you choose a hammer that won't ruin your wrists by Tuesday?
This is where most beginners shoot themselves in the foot. They buy a 4-pound man-killer sledge and think they're going to move steel faster. All they actually do is tear their rotator cuff. A 2-pound cross-peen hammer is the sweet spot. You want the hammer to do the work, not your grip. I usually tell people to hold the handle like they're shaking hands with an old friend. Firm enough that they won't leave, but not so tight you're trying to crush their knuckles.
I've watched you work, and you do this thing where you let the hammer bounce back up. It looks like you're hardly trying.
That's the physics of the anvil giving you a gift. If you fight the rebound, you're basically punching yourself in the arm all day. You let it dance. And the cross peen, that's the wedge-shaped side of the hammer, that's your secret weapon. When you hit the metal with the flat face, it spreads in all directions. But when you use the peen, it moves the metal specifically in the direction you're aiming. It's like using a spatula versus a rolling pin.
Okay, let's talk about the struggle, because I know you, Tiger. I know there was a learning curve that involved some colorful language. What's the biggest mistake you see people making when they first pick up the tongs?
It's the popsicle stick syndrome. Beginners get the metal hot, take it to the anvil, and then they keep hitting it long after it's turned black.
I'm guessing hitting black iron is a sin in your world?
It's the fastest way to break your tools and your spirit. Once that glow leaves the steel, it stops being clay and starts being, well, steel again. You're just vibrating your teeth out of your head for no reason. I tell my students, you have about 30 seconds of high quality thinking time per heat. If you aren't sure what your next move is, put it back in the fire. The fire is free, your joints aren't.
So it's a game of patience disguised as a game of strength.
Exactly. And then there's the grip. People try to hold the metal too tight with the tongs, or they use the wrong tongs for the shape. I've seen more UFOs, unidentified flying objects, zip across the shop because someone tried to hold round stock with flat jaw tongs. It's like trying to pick up a wet noodle with chopsticks. If the metal isn't secure, you aren't blacksmithing. You're just playing a dangerous game of fetch.
Speaking of danger, let's address the elephant in the room. The heat. How do you not lose a finger or an eyebrow every time you light that thing?
Well, I've still got most of mine. The biggest thing is realizing that black hot is still burn your skin off hot. Steel looks exactly the same at 400 degrees as it does at 70. You only make the mistake of grabbing the cold end of a bar once. Now, I have a habit of hovering my hand near a piece of metal before I touch it, feeling for that radiant ghost of heat. It's a sixth sense you develop.
Like a Jedi, but with more soot.
Let's talk about the actual moves, though. Because you aren't just hitting it randomly, you're drawing out, which is stretching it longer. You're upsetting, which is shortening it to make it thicker, which incidentally is what happens to my waistline every Thanksgiving. And you're bending.
Drawing out always looks like magic to me. You take this chunky bar and suddenly it's a graceful tapered leaf or a hook. Is that just a matter of hitting the edges?
It's about the angle. You work the metal on the edge of the anvil, using the anvil's corner as a second hammer. You're essentially squeezing the metal out like toothpaste. But here's the thing, you have to keep it square. The moment you let it get diamond-shaped, you're in trouble. You have to be disciplined. Square, then octagonal, then round. If you try to go straight to round, you'll end up with something that looks like a chewed-up dog toy.
And what about forge welding? I've seen those guys on TV get all stressed out about the sparkle. That seems like the final boss of blacksmithing.
It really is. You're trying to get two pieces of steel so hot they actually dissolve into each other. It's a chemistry experiment in a volcanic environment. You need flux, usually just plain old borax from the laundry aisle, to keep the oxygen from ruining the party. When you see those tiny white sparks, that's the steel starting to literally burn. That's your window. You have about 2 seconds to tap them together. If you hit too hard, the molten surface just splashes everywhere. You have to be gentle.
Gentle is not a word I associate with a man holding a hammer.
That's the secret, Alex. Blacksmithing is just a very loud, very hot form of jewelry making. It's all about finesse.
So if someone is listening to this in their garage right now, looking at an old hammer and a pile of scrap, what's their Hello World project? What's the thing that won't end in a trip to the ER?
The humble S-hook. It sounds boring, but it teaches you everything. You have to taper both ends, which is drawing out. You have to bend them into perfect curves, which teaches you how to use the horn of the anvil. And it's actually useful. You finish it, you hang it up, and you realize, I just made a permanent object out of thin air and fire.
There's something deeply satisfying about that. In a world of plastic and things that break in 6 months, a hand-forged piece of iron feels like it's going to outlast the house it's in.
It will. I have hooks in my barn that my grandfather forged, and they're still holding up heavy harnesses without a groan. There's a weight to this craft, literally and figuratively. You aren't just making a tool, you're participating in a conversation that's been going on for 3,000 years.
Well, as long as that conversation doesn't involve me setting my shoes on fire, I'm in.
Just wear leather boots, Alex. Synthetic sneakers and stray sparks are a recipe for a very fast, very painful tap dance.
Note taken. Leave the Nikes in the house.
The takeaway for today isn't that you need a perfect shop. It's that the barriers are mostly in your head. If you have a heavy rock, a hot fire, and the patience to listen to the metal, you're already a smith. The rest is just practice and a few burned fingertips.
And maybe a very understanding group of neighbors.
That helps too. Next time, maybe we'll talk about how to make the tongs you need to hold the metal you're currently dropping on your toes.
I think the audience and my toes would appreciate that.